Let her sign it while she's still warm. Once she's gone, it gets messy, Brenda muttered. I lay there, breath shallow, body silent. They thought I was gone, but I heard everything, and I would never forget. My name is Martha Ellison, and I'm 68 years old. I've lived a quiet life in a modest brick house in Queens, the kind of home built not by inheritance or luck, but by scraped knuckles and sleepless nights. I was a school secretary for 31 years, a widow for 10, a mother for 43. I gave my life to that role, the lunches packed, the bills juggled, the holidays stretched on pennies and prayers. Michael, my only son, was the reason I kept going after Robert passed, and now he was standing outside my hospital curtain, speaking of my death like it was a business opportunity. The stroke hadn't taken my hearing. That was their mistake. They saw my stillness and assumed silence meant surrender. Brenda's voice was sharp, clipped, the same tone she used when she used to speak to telemarketers. We'll say it's a hospital form. She won't know the difference. Michael murmured something. I couldn't make out every word, but the gist was clear. Hesitation. Not guilt, not concern, just hesitation. If we wait, we'll need probate. That's a nightmare, Brenda said. Get her to sign now while she's still technically here. I didn't flinch. My limbs were too heavy to move even if I wanted to, but my mind, it was fully awake, and every word scorched itself into memory. They spoke of power of attorney like it was a coupon. They discussed selling my house as casually as you'd plan a weekend trip. They wanted my wedding ring, my husband's last gift to me, the one I hadn't worn in years because it made me miss him too much. Brenda even said it. She's not married anymore. She's not anything anymore. That was the moment I realized they had already buried me. I just hadn't stopped breathing yet. There's a different kind of pain that comes when the people you love don't even bother hiding their betrayal. I thought I had prepared myself for aging, for losing independence, but nothing prepares you for becoming invisible. To them, I was no longer a woman, no longer a mother, just a signature, a key, a legal hurdle. They didn't cry. They didn't say, I hope she recovers. They calculated timelines and asset values. That night, I stared at the ceiling for hours, the rhythm of the IV drip ticking like a metronome to the rage building inside me. I wasn't angry because they wanted my house. I was angry because they saw me as disposable, as less than human. That ring they wanted to pawn, Robert bought it when we were still broke, before Michael was born. He worked overtime, skipping lunches so he could afford it. When he died, I wore it every day until the grief became too heavy. Now they wanted to melt it down for scrap. I felt no more loyalty, no more illusions, but I felt clarity. They thought I was helpless, so I would let them think so. They believed I was drifting. I would let them lead the way. And when the time came, I would make sure they never forgot what it means to underestimate someone who built everything they have. When a nurse finally entered, Michael's tone changed like a light switch. Hi, Mom, how are you feeling? I didn't respond. I looked past him, through him. Let the silence stretch. Let them grow comfortable. Because I wasn't done. I was just getting started. They returned the next morning, just as the nurse finished checking my vitals. Michael entered first, holding a coffee cup like a child offering penance. Brenda followed with a clipboard tucked under her arm, her armor, her agenda. They smiled too much. Their footsteps were too light, their voices too sweet. People don't act that cheerful around a recovering stroke patient unless they're hiding something. But they weren't just hiding, they were preparing. I stayed quiet. I kept my eyes soft and blank. I blinked slowly, as if unsure where I was. Inside, I was sharp, watching, measuring. Michael pulled a chair beside the bed and spoke gently, as if I were 5 years old. "Just some hospital forms, Mom. Routine stuff." I nodded slightly, my expression vacant. I let my gaze drift to the window, then back to his face like I barely recognized him. He took that as a win. Brenda opened the folder. Her nails tapped against the page like a metronome of manipulation. I noticed the bold letters at the top, durable power of attorney. Below it, several lines for initials, then one for my signature. She uncapped a pen, held it out. No hesitation, no shame. "Let's just get this done so you can rest. We'll take care of everything." I reached for the pen with an unsteady hand. I let it tremble the way they expected it to. I hovered over the paper, then paused. "Do you know where my ring is?" I asked. The air shifted. Brenda froze. Michael's expression cracked just for a moment. A flicker of unease. Then she smiled again, tighter this time. "What ring, sweetheart?" "My wedding ring," I murmured. "It was in the drawer before I came here." They exchanged a look. Michael cleared his throat. "Maybe the nurses took it." I didn't reply. I set the pen down slowly, as if my body had simply run out of strength. I let my eyelids flutter a bit. My lips parted slightly. "I'm tired," I whispered. They didn't push. Not then. They thought they had time. They would try again. Soon. 2 days later, I was discharged and taken home. Not because I had fully recovered, but because they believed I was no longer a threat. They told the doctors I'd be under full-time care. I saw the relief in Brenda's posture when the discharge papers were signed. She already considered the house hers. The moment I stepped through the door, I knew something was wrong. The photographs were gone. Robert's woodworking tools vanished. The curtains I had sewn myself replaced with cold beige panels. They had been preparing the property, as Brenda would later phrase it, neutralizing me, stage by stage. I stood in the middle of my living room, holding my breath, feeling like a guest in my own home. They had touched everything except one thing, my mind. Over the next week, I let them believe they were winning. I asked the same question twice. I stared at the kettle too long. I forgot the day on purpose. And when they smiled and said, "She's not all there anymore," I smiled back when they weren't looking. Every patronizing comment was fuel. Every discarded memory made my spine steelier. They had taken my ring. They had rewritten my space. They were trying to erase me without burying the body. But I wasn't just waiting. I was watching. I was counting. I was remembering. That was when I called Doris. She had been my friend for over 40 years. She knew how to listen, how to read between silences. When she arrived that Sunday with cookies and something wrapped in a kitchen towel, I nearly cried, but didn't. Inside the towel was a voice recorder, small, sleek, simple. "You press here to start," she whispered, then again to stop. I held it like a relic, something sacred. She looked me in the eye. "They don't think you're strong. That's your advantage." For the first time in weeks, I felt power return. Not to my limbs, but to my will. I didn't need to fight yet. Not with yelling, not with fists. I would fight the way they never expected, by pretending to lose, so I could win. Returning home was not a relief. It was a ritual in erasure. The space I had once nurtured was now cold, unfamiliar, sterile. My curtains were gone. The embroidered pillows I had sewn during Robert's chemotherapy discarded. Even the smell had changed. The soft trace of lavender and cinnamon I had always loved was replaced by lemon disinfectant and something artificial, like a hotel pretending to be someone's home. They said it was for my safety. They said it was freshening the space. But everything they touched no longer belonged to me. The home I built was being stripped bare, one memory at a time. I moved slowly through the hallway. It wasn't just the stroke. It was the weight of knowing I was being edited out of my own life. Brenda had labeled the boxes in permanent marker. To sell, donate, trash. I looked at the one marked sentimental. It was the only box not sealed. A photo of Robert and me peeked through the top flap, faded, edges curled. She had left it like that, as if inviting the universe to toss it out for her. I didn't touch it, not yet. Each day I watched them. Brenda buzzed through the rooms like a contractor on a deadline, talking about value, renovations, and open house strategies. Michael followed, quieter, but just as complicit. He nodded at every suggestion. He helped move furniture, took phone calls in hushed tones, and rarely looked me in the eye for more than a second. He didn't need to. His silence said everything. The voice recorder Doris had given me rested quietly beneath a folded napkin in the kitchen. I activated it each morning and let it run, capturing conversations, footsteps, the casual cruelty of people who no longer feared being overheard. No one noticed. Why would they? They thought I was drifting, mentally gone. Easy to manage, too slow to remember. They were wrong. At night, I listened, not because I doubted what I had heard, but because I needed to remember every word, each insult, each plan, each assumption. I needed to build a fortress inside myself where their actions could no longer injure, only inform. It wasn't rage I felt, it was clarity, sharp, surgical, cold. They weren't trying to kill me. That would have been quicker. They were hollowing me out slowly, surgically removing pieces of my identity until only the legal shell remained. Sometimes Michael would bring me tea or offer to walk me to the mailbox. For a second, it almost felt like the son I raised was still in there. But then I'd see his name printed next to authorized agent on a property document left casually on the table. Then I'd hear him chuckle when Brenda made a joke about memory loss. Whatever part of him that had once protected me was now just convenient compliance. The real betrayal wasn't theft, it was the slow dismissal of my worth. The way they assumed I wouldn't notice, wouldn't resist, wouldn't matter. But I had something they didn't know I still carried: resolve. I stopped trying to retrieve what they had taken. I started focusing on what I still controlled: my memory, my will, my ability to wait. On Thursday, Brenda introduced a financial planner to me like I was a toddler meeting Santa Claus. She spoke slowly, sweetly, guiding me through the options, though I wasn't invited to speak. I smiled. I nodded. I asked what day it was. I let my sentences trail off like loose threads. They thought they had broken me, but every time they underestimated me, they handed me another piece of their plan. Every smug assumption was a rope I would one day pull tight. I was no longer a victim. I was no longer even angry. I had passed through fire and come out something else. I didn't need to scream. I didn't need revenge. I needed only one thing: proof. And I was collecting it, quietly, completely, and without mercy. It rained that night, not the soft kind of rain that lulled you to sleep, but a heavy, relentless downpour that drummed against the windows like a warning. The kind of rain that made memories crawl back from dark corners. The kind that didn't ask permission to haunt you. I lay in bed, awake, the ceiling fan spinning shadows across the room. The house was quiet, too quiet for a place that used to breathe with life. Every tick of the clock was a reminder that time had not stopped for anyone, especially not for me. In the drawer beside my bed, the voice recorder blinked, fully charged, still warm from use. I hadn't listened to the latest recording yet. I already knew what it would say. They were getting bolder, sloppier, crueler. Some nights I wondered if I was going too far, pretending to forget, collecting voices like evidence in a trial that hadn't begun, keeping secrets from the very people I once called family. But then I would remember what they had done. Not just the lies, not just the manipulation. No, it was the quiet choices that cut deepest. They removed my wedding photo from the mantel without asking. They threw away my recipe box, 40 years of handwritten notes gone like trash. They replaced the hallway mirror, the one Robert hung the week after we moved in, the one I stood in front of every morning, checking my lipstick, while he teased me for still being vain at 60. That mirror reflected a woman who had built this life. They didn't just remove it, they replaced it with a blank wall. And yet, some traitorous part of me still searched for Michael, the boy he used to be, the boy who clung to my hand in parking lots, who cried when I left him at kindergarten, who once gave me a Mother's Day card scribbled in orange crayon. "You're my forever." Where had he gone? Was he still in there, buried under paperwork and convenience, and a wife who saw me as a burden dressed in soft slippers? Or had he always been this person, and I just refused to see it? The guilt came in waves, short, sharp, uninvited. I would catch myself hoping he'd knock on my door, not for signatures or questions about my prescriptions, but just to ask how I was, to sit, to talk, to remember who I had been to him. But that knock never came. What came instead were forms, appointments, discussions in the next room about moving timelines and real estate commissions. I wasn't his mother anymore. I was an asset being repositioned. At 3:17 a.m., I got out of bed. I didn't turn on the lights. I moved slowly, barefoot on cold tile. I passed through the kitchen, pausing at the cabinet where the cookie jar used to be. Brenda had tossed it, said it was too childish for staging. That jar had held Michael's favorite ginger snaps. I used to bake them when he came home, heartbroken from teenage breakups. Now, he didn't even notice it was missing. I stepped outside into the rain. It soaked my nightgown instantly, but I didn't flinch. I stood beneath the sky, eyes closed, letting the water wash down my face, down my spine. I wasn't fragile. I wasn't fading. I was remembering. When I returned inside, the house felt colder than the rain. I went straight to my desk, opened the drawer, took out the recorder and a small notebook. I began writing names, dates, details, not because I wanted revenge, but because I needed truth. The kind of truth that couldn't be twisted by smiling faces and forged signatures. The old Martha, the quiet one, the soft one, had been slowly dying for years. That night, she finished dying, and something else took her place. Not rage, not cruelty, clarity. Some mornings arrive like fog, soft, shapeless, forgettable. But this one felt different, sharper, like something inside me had finally stopped shrinking and started sharpening. I woke up before the sun. The house was still, not with peace, but with the tension of a bomb that hadn't gone off yet. And I knew something. This was the day I would stop being afraid of my own shadow. I didn't slam drawers or make grand declarations. I moved quietly, like I always had, but with new precision. Every breath, every step had purpose. I started with the drawer Brenda had never found. Old, stubborn, tucked into the bottom corner of the laundry room. She had opened it once, tugged twice, then called it junk and moved on. Typical. Inside, I found what I was looking for. The original house deed, still paperclipped to the loan payoff letter from 1999. Robert and I had signed that letter in blue ink. I traced our initials with the tip of my finger. Next to it, a handwritten list of emergency contacts, one of them scratched out, 2 disconnected, but 1 number still valid. I underlined it, then I folded the papers into a fresh envelope, labeled them with care. Do not destroy legal record. I slid it under the floorboard in my bedroom closet, the one place no one had bothered to clean. Later that morning, I told Brenda I wanted to sit in the garden. She offered to push the chair. I declined. I walked, not far, not fast, but deliberately. I needed her to see that. While she watered the potted plants, her new hobby, I slipped through the side gate, waved to my elderly neighbor 2 doors down, and asked to use her landline. 10 minutes later, Doris had 3 instructions, 1 date, and the name of an attorney I remembered from church newsletters. She didn't ask why. She didn't need to. All she said was, "Finally." Back inside, Brenda was on the phone again. Something about closing incentives and light staging. She didn't notice me slip past, but Michael did. He looked up from the kitchen table, eyes narrowing slightly. There was something behind that glance, a flicker, suspicion perhaps, or guilt. I gave him nothing to read, just silence. That evening, Brenda handed me a new form, bright green this time. Friendly fonts. Estate efficiency packet, a lie wrapped in pastel. I accepted it with a smile. My hands didn't tremble. My eyes didn't wander. I didn't sign it. I didn't tear it. I placed it neatly on the end table beside my teacup. Then I reached beneath the cushion and pressed a small button. The recorder clicked to life. Brenda kept talking. I just listened. After dinner, I went into my room and locked the door, something I hadn't done in years. It felt powerful, even if the knob could be twisted open with a fork. I opened my notebook. Page by page, I logged everything. Dates of conversations, words used, papers presented, expressions, tones, lies. It wasn't revenge I wanted. It was clarity and leverage. That night, I did something I hadn't dared in weeks. I pulled out the small wooden box Robert had made for our letters. I unfolded one, his handwriting jagged from chemo, but still him. Martha, if you're reading this, it means you're still here. And that means you haven't given up. Never let them mistake your silence for surrender. I read it twice, maybe 3 times. Then I placed it back and whispered, "I'm not done. Not even close." The next morning, I made my own tea. Brenda looked up, startled. Michael dropped his phone. I didn't speak. I sat, calm, steady, in control. They thought they were watching me fade, but I was just beginning to focus. The house had grown quieter, not the peaceful kind of quiet. This was the silence of something rotting just beneath the wallpaper. It was in the way Brenda avoided eye contact when I entered the room. It was in the way Michael tapped his fingers faster than usual on his phone screen whenever I passed by. They sensed something, maybe not what I knew, but enough to know they'd gone too far. They were starting to fear the stillness. That morning, I set the dining table with 4 chairs. No one was coming for breakfast, but I wanted them to see it. My place, my space, my rules. I made strong tea, the way Robert liked it. No sugar, extra steeped. The aroma filled the room, competing with the scent of fresh paint Brenda insisted on using in the hallway. A smell that tried too hard to cover something up. The newspaper was delivered as usual, wrapped in plastic. I didn't read it. I opened it slowly, methodically, and placed it on Michael's chair. The headline had nothing to do with me, but the gesture did. Control. I was reclaiming it in teaspoons and silence. Later that day, Brenda entered the kitchen and paused. I didn't look at her. I stirred my tea, slow and steady. She stood for a long moment, waiting for me to speak. I didn't. She left without a word. That was the beginning of the unraveling. That afternoon, I placed 3 envelopes in a drawer in my bedroom, each labeled with black marker. To my lawyer, evidence A. To my lawyer, evidence B. To be opened only if I am moved. Inside them, USB drives, transcribed notes, printed emails. Everything I had recorded, written, observed. Not threats, facts, not vengeance, insurance. 2 days later, Michael brought up options. Not as a question, as a plan, assisted living, weekly check-ins. A place more suitable for someone at your stage. He never said the word decline, but it hung between us like a slur. I nodded. I smiled faintly. I let my fingers linger on the edge of the table. Then I asked him to hand me my notebook, the blue one, the one labeled recipes. He did, oblivious. Inside it were no recipes, only records. That evening I called Doris again, this time from the garage. The insulation made it a safe cave for short conversations. I didn't have to say much. She had already spoken to the lawyer, a young woman named Chloe Davies, smart, fast, sharp. We set the meeting for Friday, private, unofficial, but real. By Thursday, I started sleeping with the recorder beside my pillow. Not because I needed more proof, because I wanted to hear them in the dark, to remember the exact tone, the cruel precision. It kept me alert. It kept me angry, but not the wild, helpless kind of anger. Number. This was cold anger, refined, usable. When Friday came, I dressed carefully, not in something fancy, in something familiar. The gray sweater Robert gave me one Christmas, the one with a fraying cuff I never repaired. It reminded me I had been loved, once, truly. I looked in the mirror. I saw lines, but I also saw the fire behind them. I wasn't a burden. I wasn't a placeholder. I wasn't done. Chloe arrived precisely at 11 a.m. Michael was out. Brenda was upstairs. I opened the door myself. She didn't flinch when she saw me. Didn't condescend. She sat across from me at the dining table I had claimed back. And she listened. I showed her the documents, the envelopes, the names. I told her everything. Not dramatically, not tearfully, just clearly. Fact by fact, stone by stone. She didn't say much when I finished. She just looked me in the eye and said, "You're not alone in this. And you're not wrong." And for the first time in weeks, I believed it. The sun pierced through the blinds that morning. Not warm, not gentle. It was a cold light, one that exposes rather than comforts. It didn't ask permission. It simply arrived. I got out of bed without hesitation. My feet found the slippers before my mind had time to weigh their purpose. Today wasn't about comfort. It was about confrontation. I stood at the mirror for a moment, brushing back the silver strands that had multiplied in the past few months. Not out of vanity, but so I could look myself in the eyes, truly look. Not as a mother, not as a dependent, not as a shadow in her own house, just as a woman who had finally remembered who she was. Brenda had scheduled a family meeting. Her tone on the voicemail was sugary, overly polished. It was the same syrup she poured over every manipulation. But this time it didn't stick. Michael had texted me a thumbs-up emoji. No words, just that. As if this meeting were routine, as if my presence was an afterthought. They had no idea what was coming. I made a pot of black coffee and poured it into the mug Robert once gave me. "You are the backbone of this house," it read. They'd tried to fracture that backbone, but they underestimated how bones, when broken, grow back stronger. I didn't dress for war. I wore the gray cardigan I used to wear when reading bedtime stories, the one with a frayed pocket, the one that smelled faintly of lavender and old libraries. I wanted them to remember who I was before they erased me. They sat in the living room like executives at a board meeting, Brenda with a thick folder on her lap, Michael tapping nervously on his phone. Neither of them met my eyes. Brenda launched first. Her voice was smooth, well-rehearsed. She used words like retirement transition, safety planning, and simplifying assets. The lies were dressed in logic. Michael nodded dutifully. His loyalty had become currency, cheap and for sale. When she finished her pitch, she slid the folder across the coffee table. I didn't even glance at it. Instead, I reached beneath the table and pulled out a smaller envelope, simple, firm, sealed tight. I placed it directly on top of her documents. Then I looked Michael straight in the eye. "I spoke to Chloe," I said. Silence exploded in the room. Brenda stiffened. Michael blinked as if he'd misheard, but he hadn't. He knew who Chloe was. He knew what that name meant. And I watched as their illusion of control began to disintegrate. Brenda reached forward, perhaps to object, to perform damage control. I lifted my hand, slow, steady. She froze. "I know everything," I said, my voice quiet, clear, not loud. I didn't need volume. The truth did the speaking. The recordings, the real estate calls, the emails, the forms you filled while I was medicated, the whispering after lights out, the things you never thought I'd notice. Michael's face drained of color. Brenda tried to say something, but the words tangled in her throat. "I may have been quiet," I continued, "but I was never blind." I stood, gripping the armrest for balance, not out of weakness, but resolve. "You didn't break me," I said. "You just gave me time to rebuild." Then I turned, not angrily, not dramatically, but deliberately. Every step toward the hallway was a reclaiming of space, of voice, of power. By sundown, my lawyer had already delivered a cease and desist notice to Brenda's firm and an official revocation of all property transfers executed under pressure. The law had spoken, but I had already spoken louder, with my silence, with my presence, with my will to still be here. That evening, I sat in the backyard garden. The wind moved gently through the leaves. I listened to it, not for threats, but for peace. The world hadn't changed, but I had. I was no longer their burden. I was my own keeper. They had tried to write the ending to my story, but I had taken back the pen. And this was just the beginning of the chapter they would never be allowed to narrate. The days after were silent, but not in the way they'd expected. It wasn't the silence of defeat. It was the silence of decision. I moved slower, not out of weakness, but purpose. I let them walk past me in the hallway without a word. I cooked only for myself. I folded my own clothes and closed my bedroom door when I slept. It unnerved them more than yelling ever could. One morning, I opened the wooden chest at the foot of my bed. Inside were things that once defined me: my nursing badge from 1983, a Robert's last Father's Day card, and a scarf my son made when he was 10. I didn't cry. I chose. I picked what came with me and what stayed behind. The small apartment I found was nothing luxurious. One bedroom, a window facing west, a tiny kitchen with a sink that groaned when turned. But it was mine, fully mine. I used the money I had quietly saved over the past year, birthday cash I hadn't spent, a small pension I had rerouted, a few trinkets from the attic sold online, each carrying stories they never asked to hear. I didn't tell them I was leaving, not because I wanted to punish them, but because they had forfeited the right to know my next steps. Brenda knocked on my door around noon. I was already packing the last box. "Where are you going?" she asked, as if she deserved an answer. I looked at her, not with anger, but with clarity. "Somewhere I'm not spoken over." Michael stood behind her, silent. For once, he didn't correct me. He didn't defend her. Maybe he couldn't. Maybe it was too late. That night, I closed the front door of that house without hesitation. I didn't leave a note. I didn't glance back. I carried only 2 bags, one with clothes and one with my name written back inside it. The apartment smelled of new paint and something old, maybe dust, maybe freedom. I sat on the small couch and let the quiet surround me. This wasn't loneliness. This was unclaimed peace. I boiled water, not tea for guests, just hot water with lemon for myself. I lit a candle, not for ambiance, just because I could. I opened the window. The breeze was cold, almost sharp, but it made me feel alive. The first week, I wrote again. Pages filled with things I hadn't let myself say in years. How it felt to be erased slowly. How silence had once been survival, then prison, then weapon. How motherhood can become a leash when love is misunderstood. I didn't write for revenge, I wrote for record. Because truth doesn't need an audience, it only needs a witness, and I was enough. Doris came on Sunday with a pie and her dog. We ate on the balcony. The dog barked at shadows, and she laughed so hard she cried. She looked at me and said, "You look like yourself again." I smiled, not the polite kind I'd worn for years, a real one, lazy, quiet, full. I think I finally am. One night, as I watered a single potted plant on the sill, I whispered something I hadn't said in decades. "I'm proud of you." Not to the plant, not to the wind, to myself, to the woman who stayed too long but left just in time. People think bravery looks like shouting or slamming doors. But sometimes bravery is sitting still, packing your bags in silence, and walking out of the house without needing anyone to follow. I didn't run. I didn't hide. I simply took my name back. And with it, my place in the world. If you've ever felt invisible or silenced in your own family, you are not alone. Stories like Martha's are real, and far too many remain untold. If her story reminded you of your own, please share it in the comments. Your voice might be the light someone else needs today. If this touched your heart, don't forget to like the video and subscribe for more true stories that honor dignity, courage, and second chances. You matter, and you are never too old to reclaim your life.